when you're in the writing phase, when you're in the idea phase, I think not having any of that in your head is the best way to move forward.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special ScreenCraft conversation Beyond Boundaries with Lisa Taddeo on crafting real female desire and dark truths. With educational resources, industry insights, and direct connections to agents, managers, and producers, ScreenCraft helps writers advance their careers through a range of opportunities, including contests, coverage, and mentorship programs. ScreenCraft serves as a bridge between emerging talent and the film and television industry. Lisa serves as the creator and executive producer of the limited series from Starz, Three Women, which she adapted for screen with her nonfiction book of the same name, an instant international phenomenon and a #1 bestseller for New York Times and Sunday Times, among other acclaim. The riveting true story about the sex lives of three real American women, based on nearly a decade of reporting, boasts as an impressive cast that includes Shailene Woodley, Betty Gilpin, and DeWanda Wise. The trailer was met with much excitement by fans. The literary sensation is best known being the New York Times #1 bestselling author and two-time recipient of the Pushcart Prize. Her whirlwind success from Three Women was followed by her intoxicating debut novel, Animal, which was a national and international bestseller. With film rights quickly being acquired by MGM and Plan B, with Lisa adapting for screen, marking her feature writing debut. She most recently completed her literary trifecta with the release of Ghost Lover, which received glowing reviews. Her raw depictions and visceral explorations have earned her an impressive list of admirers and public champions of her work, including Harry Styles, Gwyneth Paltrow, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Reese Witherspoon, Taylor Swift, Sophie Turner, and so much more. Today, we cover journeys from nonfiction to fiction and screen adaptation. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa.
Thank you for having me, Janita.
Thank you. Okay, we'll jump right in. So, what was it like adapting Three Women from a nonfiction narrative into a screen story?
It was challenging because there were a couple of layers to sort of to get through. The first layer was just adapting a book for screen. Obviously, there's a lot of decisions to make and what to leave out, what to perhaps add for dramatic tension if there wasn't enough in real life, which I find that there always is. But the second layer for me was to make sure that and I kind of didn't know how hard it was going to be on me the second time around because I thought I'd already done it, but making sure that the women were sort of honored in the book, not even honored, but just kept to their truth, which I think is the highest form that you can honor a person, is just telling their truth or letting them tell their truth without judgment. Doing that for the show uh was another level of, now there's a lot more people involved than just me and my editor on the book. Obviously on a television show it's hundreds of people, and the actors are the ones controlling, the directors and the actors are the ones sort of controlling the way that the real person is being seen on screen. So I felt like, oh, I have to make sure, I have to both take care of this latest iteration of these women and their stories, but at the same time I have to also honor the way that these actors, directors, new writers that we brought on, lots of elements. I had to also honor the way that they wanted to make their own art. So the sort of concatenation of those two was definitely a lot of thinking. But I feel what I feel beyond feeling happy, thrilled with the final product, is also really grateful for how much concern, effort, and detail-oriented understanding of these people was put into this by everybody.
That's amazing. And with that, were there any certain elements that you found challenging to translate visually?
Um, challenging. Yes, I mean, sure, I think everything was challenging to an extent,
Mhm.
because it's a lot. It's a lot to sort of figure that stuff out. And obviously the directors were in charge of how to do a lot of the visual aspects of things. But to be honest, and normally I have a slightly negative connotation to answer towards almost everything. But to be honest, the visual translation of scenes, like for example, there's a scene that was just in episode 107 when Lena uses, and this is a true to life example from Lena's actual story, something we did not dramatize for film at all. She used a Cadbury egg to perform fellatio on the man that she was in love with. And I think the sort of one of the things that from the original, from Lena's original telling to me of that story that was so compelling to me was not this sort of like the shock factor of, oh my God, she's using a Cadbury egg to, for lubricant. And it's like a wild thing, right? But to me, when Lena was telling me that she was before they then had intercourse, he used baby wipes from her kid's car. Like she used them. She gave it to him to clean off. That to me was so the dichotomy of that, the motherhood, the baby wipes, and then this Cadbury egg, the whole the whole intermingling of humanity was so wildly interesting to me that the idea of being able to show the visual landscape of that was so it was so gratifying and exciting. And also, then there's also the nerve-wracking stuff of, Betty Gilpin, who is this phenomenal actor and is acting out this amazing moment of Lena's life where she feels empowered. And yes, maybe, for someone to look at it from the outside and go, she's empowered by using a Cadbury cream egg to perform that. And it's like, yes, she is. That's exactly what she felt. So I think the really challenging part there was knowing what we were doing and how our character, who was a real person, felt in this moment, and then also understanding how an audience might take it and the idea of Betty's face being in the same frame as, a prosthetic penis is something that, we had to just take into account for the way the world is, because we don't just look at stuff like that and not, make bathroom humor about it kind of a thing. So that was the challenging part. But I think the exciting thing of going like, how do we show, like we get to show this. I think that was something that there were so many scenes from the book that I had experienced so viscerally when the women were telling me about them, that to be able to show them the way that I felt they had felt them in another medium was beyond gratifying and exciting from just an artistic perspective.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you sort of touched on this when you were talking about taking the real life story of her performing and making that into kind of like a fictional adaptation on screen. So how different was your approach to adapting Three Women, which is based on real situations, and then Animal, which is a fictional exploration of rage and female desire. How were those approaches different?
It's, much like when I'm writing prose fiction and nonfiction, I try to use the two of them in concert with one another, because I think that my own writing is at my best when I sort of remember the rules of nonfiction, which are, the details, the honesty, the truth of everything. And then when I take those into fiction, and then also take the rules of fiction into nonfiction, which is, you can explain a feeling as though it's a fact if the person feels it. Like you can, it's part of the fabric of who they are. So for me, doing Animal and kind of because I was working on it while we were shooting, while we were in production on Three Women, it was helpful to go to something that I could just, kind of, for lack of a better word as a writer, I know that's a bad thing to say, but make up make up stuff. And a lot of animals is true to life too, true to my experiences and the women that I spoke to. A lot of it was, run off stuff from three women that I couldn't get out of my brain, but that I couldn't use in three women. So there's still a lot of that there, but with animal, the excitement of the freedom to not have to worry about people was really great, to just be like, oh, this character can do whatever she wants and I don't have to worry about someone watching it and feeling anything about it other than, oh god, I can't believe she did that, not I can't believe they made me do that.
Yeah, you can fully explore
Yeah,
that. That's
totally.
fun.
Without, yes.
And what aspects of the female experience do you feel are you're still unexplored on screen or in any other people's stories that's still unexplored? And how do you see your work contributing to that conversation?
I think that's a really beautiful question. And I feel like, one of the things that we did in episode 5, Shailene has as Gia has a miscarriage in a motel bathroom, and that was an experience that I had, and we talked a lot about how with Louise Friedberg, who directed that brilliantly and beautifully, and Shailene, who just the acting is. I mean, it's not, I have a hard time calling a lot of the work in this show acting, because I feel like the women and the men, all of the actors poured themselves into the roles in ways that I'm so like in awe of. But with that scene, I've had so many women, and a couple of husbands who write to me and say thank you for showing the way that it has looked for us. I think that, I think we really sort of sat in how long it can be. And I think that's something I haven't seen a lot of. So it was important to me that we show the rawness of that experience. I don't think we talk about I think that we still, I think there are a lot of people talking about female health care and reproduction and fertility and miscarriages and all of that. There's a lot of people doing it, but I still think that we need a lot more, because the actual, even in entertainment, sometimes we expose something, but it's still not landing in on the political end. And I think the idea of control and being able to control our own bodies is so important. So I think we need to see just more and more of that until the world starts to shift. Because I do think artists are doing it. I think we just need to do more.
Yeah, I agree. I generally agree. And your writing has been described as raw and visceral. So what draws you to explore the darker, more unfiltered side of female desire and the female complexity?
As a kid, I think I was always reading stuff that I shouldn't have been reading. And that's something I think about a lot. Like I was always reading Stephen King when I was like 8 or 9. I read The Stand when I was 10, and we were on this trip to Italy. And I just remember reading this giant book and it being about the devil and like just like the end. And I was just like, my little brain was filled with these ideas of like the end of time. And the same thing happened from a sort of like, a visual standpoint with HBO, because there was no sort of monitoring in the 80s. What I was watching, it was just kind of like a free for all. So I just experienced a wide swath of things, from books and movies. And, I think a lot of it comes from there. But what I've always liked, and I remember the first time I read American Psycho and then saw the movie, I was like, and I lean less away from that stuff these days, from like kind of like, like um shocking, like whatever. But back then, I think that I was so inspired, and Fight Club was another one. I was so inspired by the fact that there were these people just kind of saying it like it was, saying the unsaid. And I thought that was so powerful that I thought I can't write unless I do that. Like there's nothing more interesting to me as a writer than exploring that which like so like everyone else says everything. What can I say that's new? You know, and sometimes that's just the truth.
Yeah, honestly, I love that though. And same, I was reading Stephen King when I probably shouldn't have been, and
Oh, really?
his movie. So I totally get that. I love that though. And you transitioned from nonfiction to fiction and to screenwriting, and adapting to screen. So what advice would you give to writers on navigating between different storytelling formats?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously challenging. It's challenging for me. And also what's really challenging for me is flipping between a book and a script and, six Bibles and whatever a day. Like that stuff is like kind of horrendous, I think, for this business. It's tough. Um, I would say because it's hard, it's just plainly hard, I think. Um, I would say that knowing it's hard and also I think the main important thing is that everyone can, if you're a writer, if you have thoughts, if you have, interesting, unique ways of saying things, which we all do when we find them, we're all utterly unique and we all have different ways of saying the same thing, essentially. I think just knowing that you can switch between forms. I think there's so much negative gatekeeping about like who can do what. Like, oh, now she wants to do that. Oh, no, now she thinks she's that. Or now, whatever it is, I find that to be, just a horrendous aspect of all creative industries. The way that people who, maybe necessarily aren't even creative themselves just kind of want to put people into their lanes and say, stay in your lane. And I understand the human desire to categorize and keep people in boxes and stuff. But I think that when it comes to writing, knowing that you can, just like I remember one time someone reviewed one of my books and they were like, I mean, it took that risk and it was, I don't know if, and it was something about the word risk. And I was like, what's the risk? Like, I didn't just perform brain surgery. I used a word that might make you think about the experience in a different way. Or maybe you thought it was a stupid word. If that's the risk I took, I'm comfortable with that. But I think calling it a risk is a little bit strong. It's a word, and and so to me, it's let's just chill out and let people do what they want to do with their work and go, yeah, you can switch from a script to this. You can take a whole prose document and just go, I'm gonna make like you can do whatever you want. And there's going to be people telling you what to do and not to do it, whether you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. So you might as well just do what you want.
Exactly. And we get those questions a lot. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's affirming for a lot of writers. Because a lot of writers are scared about being kind of boxed in. So we get those
As
questions.
they as they should be, because I think that's the first step is validating. You are being boxed in.
Yeah.
Someone's like, oh, this person's going to write about, Hot Wheels cars from 1982 to 1987. This is their niche. That's all they can do, and it can only be in script format. It's like, we're not like, that's insane, but it makes it easy for the people to sort of, like move people around a box like a soccer grid. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's not intelligent.
Yeah, I agree. And with Animal, did you discover any unexpected challenges while adapting Animal and particularly translating the internal monologues or character motivations onto the screen?
Yes, I felt Animal was so difficult because it was so I'm really like it's a novel that even though I don't think it's a novel for a lot of people at all. But it's a novel for me and people like me. So I wrote a book that I wanted to read. So
Right.
it was a book that I felt close. I mean, obviously I feel close to things that I wrote to three women, obviously, but Animal was like a very personal unfurling for me. So it felt important to stay true to what I wanted. At the same time, I handed in a first draft and Dee Dee Gardner, who is the producer on it at Plan B, we had a conversation over the winter And I was in a major depressive episode, which isn't saying much, but still in one, but that one was worse. But I was in a major depressive episode, and we had this conversation. I didn't think I would even be able to hear anything because I was locked in such a space, but I also knew I had to do the work. So I sat there and I was having this conversation, and she just talked about um the animal is a lot about the book is, but didn't really go into it in the book as much, is about breaking the cycle of motherhood, of like sort of like doing the same things that our mothers have done to us unto our children. And I felt oh, Dee Dee was like, I think that this next draft should be the next concentric circle of the book, meaning we should really try to break the cycle. And I thought that was such an amazing note. Not just an it's more than a note. It was one of the very unique moments that I've had in this industry where someone says something that just like opens your mind in a way that makes something more beautiful. And that was really a helpful that was one of the most helpful conversations I've had. And it wasn't like a bunch of notes, it was like one just giant idea. So that was great.
I love that. That's why I love writing. It's
Yeah.
kind of like therapy, you know?
Exactly. So this pain will be useful somehow.
I know, right? I love that. And as the creator and executive producer of Three Women, how did you balance staying true to the book while meeting demands of an episodic storytelling?
It was difficult, but we had a number of people in the writers' room who were it was a small writers' room, but it was very great, tight, and smart. Laura Eason, the showrunner, Tori Sampson and Chisa Hutchinson, and my husband and co-executive producer Jackson Waite. We were, Jackson and I had lived most of the stories, so we had that. And then Chisa and Tori are brilliant playwrights who helped us make Sloane into the amalgamation of the woman that I had been talking to in the book who had not wanted to be in the book any longer, plus the actual Sloane that appears in the book. So we had that, and we had a lot of conversations about how to um how to make the episode, like, that very question, the episode, like how to sort of, make it for screen in a way that felt both true to the story, but also good for TV. We talked a lot about the connective tissue that we would use, and when we sort of the idea of using Gia, the what the for lack of a word that doesn't make me humiliated, the me character, uh, because she was the actual connective tissue, like she was the person who met all the women and linked them all. And the relationships that I have with them are integral to the book wouldn't have happened if we didn't have relationships. So showing those relationships, and in episode 7, which just aired, I think shows the Betty, the Lena and Gia relationship really, really beautifully, because it was a strong relationship that translating it to screen, having that conversation, having Gia in there, wondering how much of her to bring in, and where she's like, enough of a, and then just like you were asking about the episodic nature of it, we landed on the idea of doing this sort of like some siloed episodes of just the individual women so you could spend time with them, and then some episodes that united, all 4 of them. And I think it was a beautiful and rambling and long film-like structure that I don't know how episodic it is. I actually think it is very episodic, but I also think that in terms of TV, it's not, it's a little bit, I really think it's beautiful for a binge watch. um that's kind of how we intended it to feel. So it was hard to make it episodic, and I also don't think that if we had made it more episodic, like more like, oh, what's the cliff, that it would have retained the same honesty, because that's not really the honesty of life. And since we were doing a real book and of real women's stories, that did feel important to, I think, all of us.
Yeah, and I think it feels that way. I like that you said you approached it in like more of a storytelling from the book instead of focusing on episodes.
Yeah.
And honestly, what's next for you? Are there any themes or stories that you're especially excited about exploring in future projects?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. It's like I feel overwhelmed and inundated in kind of a really great way. For, I think for writing, it feels like, so much of writing when you haven't yet gotten to a certain place is wondering if anyone's going to read something, and writing something that, and I've still continued to this day writing things that I don't know that people are going to read. I hate to break that to anybody who thinks that that ends. It has not ended for me. And it stinks, but it's also hard. I've always experienced that part of the process, so that I'm fine with the fact that it's still around. But there are things that I know people are also waiting to read. And so there's a little bit of a, sort of, they don't link up the ones that I'm really interested in versus the ones that people are waiting to read. So that's a little bit of a, but I'm working on a book about grief, not just grief of loss, but sort of the grief of being alive, and walking through things like, miscarriage and fertility journeys, and people who have always had, some mental illness, and people not treating it like an illness, but treating it like it's something that you can get over. So that's kind of, I've been talking to a lot of people in the Netherlands who are in these sort of different spaces in their lives on their way to thinking about whether they want to end them or not. So I think it's a wild and sad zone, but it is very interesting because it's like the bones of life, and that to me is interesting. But then there's also animal, and we're looking for a director, we're like kind of just in that stage, and that's exciting. And then there's a couple of television shows that are in different stages of development. And I'm excited about everything. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunities that I've had.
I love that. And final question, is there any advice that you want to give to a writer that may be confused on if they should adapt their novel to a screenplay, or should they do the opposite, adapt their screenplay to a novel? Should they go to different forms? What advice would you give that confused writer?
I think that doing whatever, wherever the passion is always a guiding light. Unfortunately, I know that sometimes where the passion lies is not necessarily where the money is. And that's really a difficult thing just for being an artist. It's unfair and cruel to not have a steady paycheck. It really is. It's just, it's not a work. And I know that, we have great unions in place to whatever, but that aspect of it is really confusing and hard, I think, for writers. And I think that very thing, I think all writers who are in that sort of place should give themselves the sort of space to go, well, you know what, this is a messed up way of doing things to begin with. So I have to now operate within something that's not kind of, logical and fair. So when you're in this new space of going, okay, it's not logical and fair. So what is best for my energy within this place of illogical unfairness? And I think that the answer is to work on the passionate thing. If you want to turn I think that doing something, even if it's like the wrong thing, I think doing it always feels better than not doing it. At least to me, I think creating something out of something, sometimes you can, yeah, like, can you ruin something? Can you sully, something you've done by making a book into a something that doesn't turn out great? Yes, absolutely. But, you can also do that in a million other ways without ever trying to do something. So I think just do what you want. Do what you want. Don't let, as much as you can, don't let other people's agendas become yours, and certainly not in the artistic aspect of things. So I think that's an easy thing to do. It's like, notes and studio execs and stuff will sort of have a vision of the way that they think it should go, which is obviously, they get to have that. But when you're in the writing phase, when you're in the idea phase, I think not having any of that in your head is the best way to move forward.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that amazing advice. I even took that in. Thank you.
Of
Well,
course.
thank you so much for your time today, Lisa, and sharing your amazing insights and giving us a deep dive into Three Women and Animal and how you adapted those amazing projects. And for all watching, remember to see Three Women, which is now streaming on Starz, and to check out screencraft.org for more and a recording of this interview. Thank you so much, Lisa.
So much, Nate. I really love this conversation.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
Have
Thank
a
you.
lovely rest of your day.
Okay, bye, guys. Thank
Bye.
you.